we have 2 points. The coordinates at the first point A is located on the x-axis, the x value or the x coordinate, and the y coordinate is located on the y-axis. So this point here, right, the value here is x1, and the value here is y1, right? The simple saying that we have an x coordinate and we have a y coordinate. This point is located at x, certain x coordinate, certain y coordinate. For the point B that we have here, it's located at certain coordinate, x coordinate, and it's located at certain y coordinate. Are you guys familiar with that? Because we looked at points, right? Plotting points, correct? Everybody's good with that? Okay. All right. So we have the three formula there. All right, and as mentioned before, we have the length, the gradient, and the midpoint formula. And this asks us to find the length that connects the 2 points, 2, 9, and 10, 15, and the gradient of the line as well as the coordinates of the midpoint. All right, and so what we want to do is all right, so we label the points. We went over that quickly. And then we get the formula that we want to use, which is a gradient formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then we're going to have input the values. In this case, y2 is 15, y1 is 9. So it's 15 minus 9 over 10 minus 2. Again, subtracting the y values. The difference in the y's, or the y values, 15 minus 9 divided by 10 minus 2. And that will simplify down to 6 over 8, which can be further simplified as 3 over 4. All right, so next, we'll look at the midpoint formula. We get the formula, and then we select the values that we want to substitute. So we're going to substitute x with 1, x2 with 10, y1 with 9, and y2 with 15. And we put the division over 2, all right? So what we really find here is the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So add them up and divide by 2. It's like when you add in the two grades, you want to find your average. Okay, and so simplifying this, 2 plus 10 is 12, divided by 2 will give us 6. 9 plus 15, that will be 24, divided by 2, which give us 12. Okay, and so this is, remember, this is a point. So they want to find the midpoint, meaning they want to find the point in the sense of giving its location of that particular midpoint. The location is the x coordinate is at 6 and the y coordinate is at 12. So it's a point, so you want to write down the coordinates. Okay, and so that's how you basically would do that. All right, so let's look at another one. Give me a second. Now we want to find the length of the line. So we're going to utilize the formula that we have here. Write down the formula. First thing you want to do, write down the formula. All right, first thing you want to do is get the formula to find the length of the line. The next thing is just to substitute. Substitute the values into that formula. Y2 is 10, Y2 is, well, these are not labeled the way we would want to. So let's look at it. Y2 is what? Y2 is 15 and Y1 is 9. X2 is 10 and X1 is 2. We realize the difference with the X's and difference with the Y's. But then would it be a different, well, this is not substituted correctly in terms of what's here, but the answer will still be the same. In other words, this part here, the square of 15 minus 9 should be up here, and the square of 10 minus 2 should be on the other side over here. But again, addition is commutative. So you might find a question like, you might find something like this in CXC where they basically switch the values around, and you might be wondering if it will be correct or not. But addition is commutative. It doesn't matter if you get 5 here as your answer and 10 here as your answer. It doesn't matter. 5 plus 10 and 10 plus 5 is the same thing. So the whole idea is that this will still be correct. So this is basically the difference in the x's, and this over here is difference in the y's. So some formula you might find they actually put the x's here and the y's here, and some you might find them put the y's here and the x's here. But again, it doesn't matter because you're adding them. And once you're adding two numbers, the order doesn't matter in which you add them. Okay? So that's submit them correctly though, based on what the formula that you're given. And then your answer should be square of 8 plus the square of 6. So in other words, 10 minus 2 is 8, and 50 minus 9 is 6. So you're going to square 6, square 8, and squaring 6 will give us what? 36, and 8 squared is 64. And so you end up with square root of 64 plus 36. You realize we keep putting back the square root symbol, and we will keep putting it back until the final number where we can actually find the square root of that particular number. And of course, square root of 100 is 10. And since we weren't given the length in centimeters or told what units to use, we just simply use units. So we're looking at 10 units. All right? So let's say centimeters, we say 10 centimeters. Let's say it's millimeters, we say 10 millimeters. But we're just finding the length of a line, and so we just basically use units, whatever that length is. All right, so let me just run through that one more time quickly, for those of you who are not following. All right, so to find the gradient, we utilize this formula, and it's the points between 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. And the difference in the y's is really called the change in y divided by the change in x. All right, we also have the midpoint formula, where we just basically add the x's and divide by 2, add the y's and divide by 2. We have the length of the line formula, which we basically find the square root of the difference in x plus the square of the difference in y. And there's a highlight here which is saying Pythagoras, which we basically will call Pythagoras theorem, but that's something we're going to do later on. All right. And so again, we have 2 points with these are the coordinates. The first thing we do again is to do what? Label them. x1, y1, x2, y2. And then what next? We collect the formula that we want. We want to find the gradient first. So let's get a gradient formula. Put the gradient formula down. And after those words, I simply replace the coordinates. All right, replace the variables with the values. Replace y2 with what? 15, y1 with 9, x2 with 10, and x1 with 2. And then after that, you simplify, and then you'll have your gradient. In this case, 3 over 4. All right, the next one, finding the midpoint. We write down the midpoint formula, and then we also just substitute as well too. Same thing as we did up here, and then we simplify this to 6, 2, and that will be the midpoint. All right, you guys want to write that down? All right. All right, so we're going to start. Let's start as the order in which you're seeing on the screen, the length of PQ. All right, so what's the first thing should I do? What's the first thing to do? Anybody can tell me? What's the first thing should I do? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to label the points with the coordinates x1, y1, x2. Give me a second there. x1, y1, all right? x2, y2. And then I'm going to look at what I'm trying to work out, which is going to be the length of the line. So I call the formula. The length of PQ. So you're going to write PQ, right? So you're going to write PQ. And then there's a way to actually write this. In some cases, you might just see PQ like that. You can also put some poles along the sides of it, which means the length of it, the magnitude of it. All right? I prefer it looking like that. And then what we're going to do is to write the formula. All right, so it's the square of the difference in. You can put the x's or the y's, doesn't matter which one you use, as shown from the example I gave you guys. Okay, so I'm going to just write the formula. Let's use the x's first. All right, so x1 minus, or let's use x2 minus x1 plus, it's always addition, y2 minus y1, and then put the square there, right? And the square goes over everything. Okay, what's the next step from there? What is the next step from there? What you can tell me? What to do? What should I do next? Right, input the values in the formula. All right, so what we're going to write? X2 will be what? X2 should be what? X2 should be -9, thanks. Minus, what's X1? X1 is what? 3. Close it, and what do I put at the top here? Square, then a plus sign. What do I put inside? Y2 is what? 10 minus, what's Y1? Y1 is -5. Yeah. Notice the difference. This minus comes from the formula, but the -5, we want to input that in the formula as well. So it's 10 minus -5. Okay. So ensure when you're doing it that you recognize what number we're subtracting. We're subtracting a negative number, so you have to show that, right? And of course, using a calculator, you can use a calculator. -9 minus 3 is what? -12 squared. Now, use a calculator again. 10 minus -5, that'll be, you'll get 15. I'll get 15 because subtracting the negative is the same thing as positive. So really it's 10 plus 5, which is 15 squared. As I said, you can actually use a calculator to do that. And 12 squared is what? Now, -12 times -12 is positive 144. 15 times 15 is 225, which will be equal to what? The square root of 369. 369. And that will be equal to 19.2 units. Using a calculator, you press the square root button on the calculator, and then press 369 equal, and you should get 19 to one decimal place with 19.2 units. All right, 90.2 units. Is that clear? All right. Next, we want to calculate the midpoint, and so we're going to grab the midpoint formula, right? Let's go back to the midpoint formula. So we utilize the length of the line. Midpoint formula is what? X1 plus X2 over 2. So the average of the X's, comma, average of the Y's. So let's get that. So the average of the X's, so looking at the midpoint. And since midpoint is a point, our answer should be X in X and Y, right? So it's going to be average of the X's, meaning X1 plus X2 over 2. The order of addition doesn't matter, so it could be X2 plus X1 over 2 or X1 plus X2 over 2. Once you have a plus, it doesn't matter which one you put first. Comma, but you must put the X's, the average of the X's first, because remember you want your answer to be X as a coordinate, comma, Y as a coordinate, right? You want that order. So you must have the X's first, and then your Y's after, right? But in terms of the numerator, it doesn't matter the order in which you add the coordinates, because addition is commutative, meaning the order doesn't matter. And so what you're going to do here now, you're going to enter your values, in other words, substitute. And so X1 plus X2, what's X1? So you're going to add the X coordinates. You're going to add 3 to -9. You're going to add 3 to -9. And the Y coordinates, you're going to add -5 to 10. -5 added to 10. And then you're going to simplify those expressions there. What is 3 plus -9? Now 3 plus -9, when you add in a negative, your answer is going to be a minus, right? So this is actually 3 minus 9, which is -6 over 2. You're adding two numbers with opposite signs. You subtract. You're going to get 5. And you have more positives than negatives, so it'd be +5 over 2, right? And so the answer, final answer, you want the coordinates of the midpoint would be -3. The location of the midpoint would be -3. And this would be what? 2.5. All right? That'll be the location there, or 2.5. You can leave it as 5/2, but it's hard to just identify where 5/2 is. So you put it in fractional form, then you'll be able to see that it's actually in fractional form. You realize it's actually, what I mean fractional, as a mixed number. You're able to see that it's actually 2.5, and 2.5 is directly between 2 and 3. All right, so that's the midpoint. Everybody get that? All right, what about if we now to find the other one? You guys are good with this? It says basically formula and substitute. Label the points, get the formula, substitute, simplify. That's okay? All right. C, the gradient. And the gradient is basically the change in, let me just tell you what it is. It's a change in y over the change in x. All right? And the change in y meaning y2 minus y1, right? Over what? x2 minus x1. So it's basically, and there's another way we can actually represent this as rise over run. I'm going to have to reteach this topic tomorrow, but I'm going to use the graphs to teach it using graphs and then show you how it's related to the algebraic form. Because this is basically algebra. But with the graphs, you'll be able to see what's happening. That's what I originally planned, but low turnouts, I really have to go over it again. So y2 minus y1 will be 10 minus y1 being negative 5, x2 being negative 9 minus x1 is what? 3. And this will give us 10. This is plus 5. 10 plus 5 is 15. Negative 9 minus 3 is negative 12. And of course, your answer will be negative because it's a positive divided by negative is negative. And 15 divided by 12 is what? What's 15 divided by 12? Should simplify that. You can actually divide the 15 by 3 and divide the 12 also by 3, right? And what would you get when you do that? Divide 15 by 3, you get 5. And 3 into 12 goes 4 times, right? And the answer will be 1.25. All right, so 5/4 or 1.25. So that's the, well, yes, but I forgot the negative. Well, this is what you simplify the 15 over 12 as, but we have a negative there already, so this will be 1.25. Or some person may want to think that decimal format will work as well. So negative 1.25. So either this or this could represent our answer. So that's how we find the gradient. Everybody's good with that? Even though I erased it. What's the first thing we should do? Label. Very good. And label this one as what? All right, everybody, label this one as what? X1. Come on, talk. I know you all were paying attention. X1 what? Y1. Then what? X2. Y2. All right, and then I basically call the formula, and then I'm going to do a substitute. So let's substitute. What should I put inside? What should I put inside? What's x2? Negative 4 minus what? Thank you. Next one. 2. Take away 5. What's next one? All right, so this is going to give us negative 12. This is going to give us negative 3. All right. This is going to give us 144. This is going to give us 9. And this is going to give us the square root of 153, right? And you can work that out with the calculator and get your answer, right? You can work out that one. All right, next, let's do the other one. 1 second. All right, what we're going to put inside there? Talk to me. X1 is what? Plus. X2 is what? All right, it's the x's that you're adding. So look for the first digit, the first numbers in each. All right? So just simply add 8 plus -4. So the first coordinate is the x coordinate. You're adding the x coordinate. 8 plus -4. Next one will be what? Add the y coordinates now. What? 5 plus what? 5 plus 2. And so what would I get? Right, but this is minus, right? So it's 8 minus 4 is 4, like I said, very good, son. And this one will be what? 7 over 2. All right. All right, you're not sure, and so you don't want to respond and get it wrong. But in mathematics, it's okay to be wrong, and so you learn from that. Don't be afraid to get things wrong. This will be 2, and this will be 2 that goes 3 times, 3.5. All right, so we're down to the last one, which is to find the gradient. We found the length of the line PQ. We found the midpoint of PQ as well. All right, so if you have a line PQ, P and Q, let's assume that that's right. The midpoint will be somewhere here, right? It has an X location and a Y location. Go down to the X axis, go across on the Y axis. That's the midpoint. That's the idea we're talking about here. All right, next we want to find the gradient. I'm going to find the gradient. And the gradient is found by doing the same thing I said, changing y over changing x, which we call rise over run. We'll do that next class. But the formula given is y2 minus y1, as in the change in y, over the change in x, which would be x2 minus x1. And so we input those values. What are those values? Can somebody give me those quickly? What's y2? 2. What's y1? 5. What's x2? -4. What's x1? 8. And this is going to give us what? -3 over -12. 2 minus 5 over -4 minus 8. And so we have -3 over -12. Signs are different to subtract. You keep the sign, we have more negatives. Once they have the same sign, they go in the same direction, which is negative direction, so let's basically add them. And so the negative will cancel negative, right? Negative by negative is positive. So you have positive 3 over 12. We're same thing as 1 over 4, a quarter. That's the gradient. Either one of these could be the answer.